Over 70% of all agricultural land in the EU is dedicated to feeding livestock. That's just one of the staggering facts included in a new report by Greenpeace entitled Farming for Failure. Hello everyone, welcome back to Spar&Brawl. My name is Cam, and as always I'm joined by my co-host Sam. So this new Greenpeace report, which we're going to break down right now, the main point that they make is that countries are already behind their Paris climate targets. They're not going to meet them. And in fact, some industries like the agriculture and the animal farming sector of it, their greenhouse emissions are actually growing. So they need to be addressed if we're going to meet the Paris climate agreements. But of course, there are a bunch of interesting facts in the report that we're going to break down. But yeah, before I get into it, Sam, any initial thoughts, anything you want to share?
To be honest, no. I guess my initial reaction was a bit shocked because I thought, I don't know why, but I thought because there would be more importation within the EU from third world countries that have, can produce a lot of meat. Probably, yeah, I would assume their economies is more agricultural, so I didn't think it would be that big. The 71% of all like agricultural land. But I guess I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know what's the whole thing. Maybe the whole thing is not that big anyway.
Interesting. Okay, so we'll look at all the facts that
Uh,
I've taken on. I think it might answer some of your questions and doubts. But to me, it's actually not that surprising because, I mean, I know that Canada and the US, which details are not given about them in this report, but also the EU countries, they're very big in animal farming and I think they actually export a lot. Perhaps not to Latin America, but I actually have some information on China, for instance. For
oh, and
instance, so I wouldn't be surprised if they export. I mean, they themselves
like
consume a lot, but also export to some other
countries.
rich East
Yeah,
Asian countries.
yeah, Brazil is a massive exporter of,
Yeah,
meats. Australia,
yeah,
they're all big. So that's why I was a bit surprised that because Europe didn't seem, I guess, yeah, meat
yeah.
consumption in Europe is so much more as well. So maybe that's why.
But okay, so let's get into some of these little facts that the report has included. So the first overall one is that agriculture represents roughly a quarter of total emissions worldwide. So if you go and look on all kinds of greenhouse gas emissions charts on Google and all over the place, agriculture they give it somewhere between 50, here they gave 23%, they give somewhere between 15 and 23.4% depending on if you include forestry and all this to it. So this is nothing like particularly new, and it kind of meets all the other estimates that are out there. But I mean, the report really gets interesting when it talks about animal farming. But of course, agriculture alone, you can safely say it appears to be at least around 20% of all emissions worldwide. But global emissions from animal farming, so only animal farming, is roughly equivalent to the entire global transport sector, which is 14.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Now,
So
that,
all
that,
cars,
that yeah,
yeah, all
all
right.
cars, and I mean, we've talked about it before how the airline industry is actually responsible for around 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So, yeah,
But it's such a, yeah,
yes,
focus.
it has a huge focus on it. And I mean, the next fact that's related to this is that in Europe, the animal farming sector, and I guess this gets a bit to what you're saying, the animal farming sector is responsible for 70% of the region's agriculture emissions. I mean,
Okay, that makes sense.
staggering, staggering figures. And here's why the authors were saying that, we're not even on the right path, it seems, because although agriculture already counts for almost a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions, if left unchecked, it is projected to increase to a full 52% of global emissions in the coming decades, with an estimated 70% of that coming from meat and dairy production. I mean, that sounds like insane. It kind of also seems that perhaps, I guess, greenhouse gas emissions might become less in some other sectors. It's possible, maybe the transport sector and down the line. But yeah, so that, I mean, that's probably a very high estimate, but they do say if left unchecked.
Mhm.
Finally, you got two other interesting facts here. Industrial production of farm animals and their feed is a key driver of forest destruction and environmental degradation. Between 1960 and 2011, 65% of global land use change was driven by animal farming. Finally, related to that, over 70% of all agricultural land in the EU is dedicated to feeding livestock. So that's just because that's the one thing that's often forgotten. I think when people generally talk about the greenhouse gas emissions related to animal farming, is that you have to first grow a lot of food and then give it to them. So there's already some emissions associated with that, and then give it to them, feed them, and then after that, give that food to human. And yeah, over 60% of arable land in the EU is used to produce animal feed instead of food for people. So, I mean, Sam, you know very well that I'm vegan, so I didn't find much of these findings shocking, and I knew them from before. But I mean, this is one of the reasons, that people often cite for being vegan is the impact of animal agriculture on the planet and the environment, along with some other issues such as ethical issues. But yeah, anything surprising in these facts? I mean, the animal farming ones are staggering.
To be honest, I would uh, nothing surprising there. To be honest, I would say that the main problem probably is not so much that I think we, because of our biology and genetics, we probably gonna consume, like, large segments of society gonna continue to consume meat. But I do think we may over consume it, and there may be too many of us, to be honest, to be frank. So that's a big problem. I think I would say that besides the fact that, because most of the time it was talking about global warming, except the last 2 points that you mentioned, I do think besides the global warming aspect, I don't understand the people who are, let's say you don't believe in global warming or CO2 things. You can see the forest being destroyed and turned into a pasture or whatever for cows, or factory for chickens or whatever. So you can see that with your own eyes, and I don't, yeah, like, that seems to be, I don't know. I have always viewed that as a negative development. I don't understand why people tend to not care so much about that, because I just recalled, for example, all these stories about Brazil where, you know, they on purpose sometimes they set fire on
Mm.
to trees, and then they go and clean it, and then it becomes a for animal, for more meat production, because Brazil has a massive meat industry that exports meat around the world and all that. So, even if you don't believe in global warming or climate change and all that, I think this is something that should worry you, because it's destroying it's a cliche and it's a bit cheesy, but the forests and the trees and, all the good things, to be honest,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, the amount of land that needs to go to agriculture and farming is crazy. I mean, sometimes if you just go on Google News, sorry, on Google News, on Google Maps, and you kind of zoom out a bit from where you are, I mean, at least I found it surprising that you straight away sometimes start seeing like huge swaths of land that go to agriculture that are dedicated to
Well,
and that's like even nearby to where there's like populations and people.
I mean, we depend on agriculture for
Yeah.
livelihood, so it kind of makes sense. But
No, for
yeah, we
sure.
need to just sort it out a little, I think. Uh,
I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
things to do. I have this other report, I mean, here that points out. I mean, this fact that I'm going to say is only at the consumer level. But if not,
hmm
a third of all food is wasted. So, I mean, we definitely produce much more than we need, but some goes to waste because of all kinds of issues. And this latest UN report says that at the consumer level, 17% of all food is wasted. And 10 to 11% of that is due to households, which that is pretty decent, not so high. So households on average waste 10%. But yeah, like a third of all food goes to waste based on cooling issues, transportation, and all this.
I
And
There
then
is a segment done by John Oliver. I think he did it before Trump became president, because to be honest, I stopped watching after Trump's presidency. But there's a great segment about the fruit industry and how about one third or two-thirds of fruits gets thrown away just because they don't look
Yeah.
right in stuff like presentation in supermarkets, and the value of like it's not worth selling them because transporting them to the buyer costs too much, so they're just thrown away and all that. So yeah, there is definitely those issues that need
Yeah.
to be handled as well.
I mean, exactly. I mean, at the end, they just want to get rid of the food because it costs them so much. They're like, I
Put
see all these
store.
videos all the time on YouTube. They're like these vegans who eat a lot of bananas, and they go to the supermarket and they're like, "Do you have any bananas that are really ripe?" And they'll cut them up and put them in the freezer, and they just like give them cases of banana for like a few dollars, because they're gonna be throwing them out. So it just makes no
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
for
I
them because they're
understand.
too ripe. I mean, nobody buys a ripe banana. Everybody buys like very yellow or even greenish bananas.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. All right. I didn't know this money saving trick from vegan community.
But these are people who
Yeah.
have like banana smoothies, so they consume like 10 bananas in like one meal or like
Well,
a day.
it's super cheap. I could be a guy like
Oh,
that.
boy. But, and then, yeah, and another thing, I mean, animal farming, you need double the land and resources all the time. Water, I mean, the amount of water that you need to give to these poor cows and pigs that you're going is staggering. So there are all kinds of ways of reducing. But I'm gonna move to China now because this article so far we've been on Europe, not to just leave all the focus on that. But I wanted to ask you a
Can you,
question. Yeah,
mhm.
go ahead.
Be, uh, there was another article that focused on Europe. Are we going to talk about that
This
too?
was pretty much Europe. I mean, this is the one that I meant is Europe. Most of the facts that they gave was about Europe.
The Guardian article, that was really surprising to me that overall production of meat and dairy
Oh, I
food
was gonna get
is
to that
currently,
right after the Guardian thing. I'll link that to the
well, that's the
Guardian one.
Guardian
Yeah.
thing.
No, no, no. The Guardian one, I didn't put on that paper that I shared with you what it says. But I'll get to
Oh,
exactly what you said there. Don't worry
all
about it.
right,
I'll
okay,
get
I
to
got
that.
it.
But before that, I just want to
Uh,
ask your opinion actually. What do you think of like, this movement that there was for a bit? And I'm saying for a bit is because I just realized I don't see it anymore. So I live in Switzerland, and a few years ago they started selling like worms and insects and stuff in the grocery stores. But now I just realized I haven't seen them anymore for a year or two. Is that a trend that you realized or
uh,
something? It looks like, I mean, it was
I
people
think it's
didn't.
coming because I think meat is getting super expensive and people are looking for different protein.
But I don't think. I
In
mean,
East
from
Asia
what
it's
I've
been common.
seen, I don't think
But
that
in
that
Iran,
route isn't gonna work.
uh, in Iran recently fried grasshoppers
Mm.
or kind of I suppose mantis. I don't know, kind of a mantises that they've came from Saudi Arabia or Iraq or something. They are basically a type of pest for they're agricultural pests. But in southern Iran, they sort of deep fry them and people eat them. Apparently it's become a thing for a year or two. So who
Interesting.
knows?
I
I
don't think
think
it's gonna
that's a
become a
trend.
big thing
Then
though.
no,
At least in Western
maybe not
countries, there was
today.
a strong push 5 to 10 years ago, but I feel like it's died. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
just my
yeah,
anecdotal opinion.
yeah. And then, but I think we're gonna have more sort of meats, lab meats. There were some,
Yeah,
those meats that made from, I don't know. I don't know what they're made from. I genuinely don't know anything,
yeah.
but they're made in a lab. It's really weird. But
Or
I think
like,
we're gonna
or
see
the
a trend
fake
of those things.
vegan meat that we're actually gonna talk about right now. But if I were to give a tip
Fake
to
meat.
someone, is that yeah? So like Beyond Meat and all this.
Oh, aren't those basically soya stuff that existed before, like the alternative, like
Yeah, yeah,
soya that's what they are, right?
yeah. But that's different than what you were just talking
I,
about too, though.
all right. Yeah, yeah. Have you tried those? But do they taste like meat? I don't know.
So there's one of them that's actually the Beyond Meat one. Tastes very strangely like meat, but some of the other ones no, and a lot of them are kind of, they mimic more like different styles of falafel and all this, so it kind of depends. Some of them don't even try to. But okay, this is actually perfect transition for the Guardian article, because the headline of the Guardian article is China's appetite for meat fades as vegan revolution takes hold. So let me read you a few of
Wow,
this. Check this
interesting.
out. Over the last couple of years, after many years of rising meat consumption by China's middle class, uh, who basically, for whom eating pork every day was a luxury sign of financial comfort, the green shoots of a vegan meat revolution have begun to sprout. Although China still consumes, listen to this, 28% of the world's meat. That's why before I was saying it's all getting sent there, including half of all pork. Okay?
Wow.
Plant-based substitutes are growing. So let me put a few more facts with you. So yeah, so their plant-based substitutes are growing like 20 to 25% annually in terms of their share. But the more interesting stuff is about their meat consumption. So eating meat has been closely connected with the growing affluence of China. In the 1960s, the average Chinese person consumed 5 kilos of meat a year. This had shot up to 20 kilos, so 4 times that, by the late 70s, and 48 kilos, so nearly 10 times that by 2015. Which is, it's just a very common trend around the world. As people get richer, meat consumption goes up. Same thing happened in Latin America. But apparently in 2016, as part of its pledge to bring down carbon emissions, the Chinese government outlined a plan to cut the country's meat intake by 50%. And that previous point, I said it kind of, I left it for after, is because, yeah, so overall production of meat and dairy food is currently concentrated among just 5 nations: France, Germany, UK, and Spain, and Italy. But, I mean, with China eating, what was it? Well, China consumes
20, 20,
28% of the world's meat.
yeah,
So a lot
28,
of the
yeah.
meat is definitely exported to
What,
China.
but
So can't put all the blame
that's
on
that,
Europe.
that was the most surprising part to me, though, the level of concentration of the production, because I mean, it's
No, the
really
meat
weird to
and
me,
dairy
like
industry
that.
is huge. Canada, the only time
I
it
know, but
stands up to the US is when like with when there are like tariff wars that have to
but
do exactly with those two industries. That's like the only time.
sure, but France, Germany, UK, Spain, and Italy, not Canada, US, Turkey, even, or I don't know,
Yeah.
Russia,
They
or
say it's
it's just such a,
so
it's
it's
really weird to me
yeah.
that these five small UK in terms of like, I mean, they have meat production, but they're not famous for their dairy product. Or Germany, it's just weird to me that these five, they seem relatively small to uh for
Yeah, I'm
level
looking
of
at the thing.
production
I
that
don't know. They don't give any further numbers to exactly, but yeah, they just say this.
I'm very surprised US is not there, or
Yeah, I don't
Canada
know
is
why
not
they didn't
there.
include it in the report.
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah,
these,
that
yeah, these countries together could be responsible for 40%, and the US and Canada could easily be responsible for another 20, 30. You also named Australia in the beginning, which is also a big one.
mm. Maybe, yeah, maybe this is just about production within the EU or within Europe. I don't know.
I mean, the report is very Europe centered on Europe, and they have two interesting things that really drive home. I mean, how much if you really want to cut down emissions. I'm not saying cut out all meat, but taking concrete step to the in the agriculture sector and also even transportation, other places, it'll be much more fruitful than the aviation industry, which I agree we should not just like let that get out of hand, but it only represents around 3%. So even if we cut flights by half, so cut them in half, it will only reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1.5%. Whereas if you cut agriculture, let's say by half, which is a lot, but that would be like, cutting 10% or something like that, which is huge. Just something to
Yeah,
bear
yeah,
in
yeah.
mind. And since then, actually, the
Fair
best
enough.
argument I've heard in support, it's not even best, but because I don't think it's very fair. about the aviation industry, they say, but it's concentrated. It's only a few people, there's only a limited number of people who use airplanes. That's true, but I mean, that's the current reality, you know? I mean, we're not going to worry about something that isn't probably going to happen. And in the current reality, how it is, this is how much the aviation industry is responsible for. But
And to be honest, I don't think like eating less meat, like if large populations stop eating as much meat, it's not necessarily bad for them. So
I mean that. I mean that's a
it
whole
can
other
actually have
side
some
of
health.
it. That's the whole other side of it. But
Yeah.
here, check this
So
out.
no, yeah.
Check this out. The increase in animal farming in the EU over the last 10 years, okay? So the increase of animal farming in the EU last 10 years has had the same climate impact as flying around the globe over 3 million times. So if you just go around the circumference of the planet 3 million times. And the other one, which I kind of mentioned, is that animal farming in the EU emits more CO2 than all EU cars and vans combined.
Combine. Yes. Mm.
But
Okay.
yeah,
Move on. Meat,
and
please.
when it comes to eating, they say that the average European eats 60% more meat, eggs, and dairy than what dietary guidelines recommend, which I even still find low. I mean, every single meal that people have in Europe involves meat, dairy, eggs. So actually, 60% is not
Average.
too bad.
It's average. It's not.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
average. That's true.
medium or
But I mean,
meat.
you said that you didn't find some of the figures staggering. I mean, for me, still though, in my head, I'd forgotten that animal farming was responsible such a big portion of agriculture.
Oh
So I
no,
mean
I
that
did find
that
this.
that part
No,
of
no,
it
I don't
was
know. To be honest, I had no idea because it's
yeah
not something I ever looked in. So, and I don't know. Like, it's. I mean, these. Like, for example, let's say, how do you calculate? Maybe, for example, growing parsley and vegetables takes less land, but it produces more products or more items of, to be sold. So it's not necessarily like everything, you know what I mean?
mm,
Not everything should be equal necessarily. So yeah, I had no idea. So I wasn't that shocked, I
yeah
suppose. I was shocked of the concentration of production in Europe.
in Europe
Uh, that surprised me because
yeah
it seemed to be like not so economically uh, or geographically poised, but that's interesting.
yeah no. The only thing I found weird about that part was that they didn't mention Canada and the U.S. Then I wouldn't have found it strange at all. But okay, anything else? Should we wrap this up?
No, but
Okay.
I'm interested in eating, to be honest, meat alternatives just for the sake of trying new things and all that. So if anybody has any suggestions, go ahead. I
Yeah.
haven't tried these veggie sausages. I've seen some good things about them. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
personally, my favorite ones are the ones that are kind of like falafel based,
Oh,
whatever shape they're in. But I mean, vegan like fake products have grown at an insane rate recently. The same supermarkets I'm talking about where the worms appeared, but then they've disappeared. The fake vegan, like vegan product, not like the natural ones, but these kind of products, that aisle has grown like crazy. But yeah, so if anybody heard something in this video that we said that they don't totally agree with, or that they think that we're wrong, or any other kind of criticism or comments, please leave them in the description box below. And yeah, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video. Thank you.